afternoon. How's everybody doing today? Good. All right. Okay, so take out your journals, and I'm just going to walk you through, and I know normally I don't, but I'm going to walk you through today's writing prompt. So I need you to think of a time that you were trying to persuade someone. It could be a parent, guardian, teacher, it could even be a coach, a time that you were trying to persuade them to let you do something that was either new or risky, maybe something that they were inclined to initially say no to. Okay, so I want you to think about that, and then how did you go about persuading them to see things your way? What did you say? How did you say it? So you may want to describe this, just describe the speech, or better yet, write out the dialogue of how or what you said when you were speaking it, and try and be as convincing as possible. You have about 10 minutes to do that. Okay, all right, wrap it up. Good. Okay, so by the end of today's lesson, you will be able to discuss and apply the use of rhetorical strategies for persuasion. I know those are some new words up there. Okay, we're going to break that down. Rhetoric. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, you've kind of heard it before, but you're not sure. Yep, on current affairs, on the news, politicians. Yes, you're thinking along the right, way here. You would hear the term rhetoric a lot, politically speaking. What else? Do you have any other ideas about what it is? Or what it's not? Okay, all right. So rhetoric is a formal speech or writing where the writer or the speaker is going to try and inform or persuade or motivate their audience in a specific situation. So yes, you were talking about politicians. So politicians use rhetoric to try and persuade somebody or some audience, group of people, something. That doesn't necessarily mean they're lying, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're telling the truth, but they're going to use strategies to make their side of the story sound more appealing so that the audience buys into it. So, let me see here. Some example sentences to help you get this in your head a little bit better. The protesters' rhetoric is filled with anger towards the government. So the protesters, if they're firing back, they've got their picket signs out and they're up there and they're screaming out against whatever policy is being, thrown around in government. This sentence is implying that rhetoric is a bit aggressive, okay? That's not always the case. It's not always aggressive. We'll see that soon here. If someone does not stop the political rhetoric in that country, a civil war is likely to break out soon. So again, the idea that rhetoric starts to maybe influence certain people and other people are opposed to it. You have heard of a derived form of the term rhetoric, I believe. Can anybody think of what I might be thinking about there? Rhetoric? Yes, rhetorical. Rhetorical what? Rhetorical questions, yeah. So that's a form of the word rhetoric. Rhetorical, it's the adjective form. But I don't want you to get confused, because sometimes rhetorical questions are what we think about it's something that there's no answer to, or you're not supposed to respond. Rhetorical questions are used in rhetorical writing, but that doesn't mean that they don't have an answer. Normally in writing, a rhetorical question is set up to make the audience think more about something. And instead of the speaker or the writer saying what they believe, they set it up in a question format so you have to think about it. But we're not talking about those questions today. I just don't want you to start thinking about the way you visualize or hear a rhetorical question and misconstrue construe what we're doing today. So the other form that I put up here, rhetorically, for instance, you could use that, rhetorically speaking, the politician's speech was a success. So rhetorically, in other words, rhetorically, it was successful. Go ahead and turn to a partner, write a sentence and turn to your partner and share with each other. I want to see if we're on the right lines here, or if we need to back up a little bit. Okay, so I think you guys are getting it. We're going to spend some more time on this. This is just like a little introduction for you. We're definitely going to break this down further because there's actually 3 specific points, can't be sides, can I? 3 specific points to rhetoric. We're going to get into that, but for today, I don't want you to worry about that. But just remember that one's rhetoric as a writer or a speaker is something that they use to get their purpose across. And we're going to see this with Frederick Douglass and with Harriet Jacobs. They're not just writing a slave narrative. They're writing because they have a purpose. Whether it's Frederick Douglass and one of his many purposes is to start a movement of abolishing slavery, or Harriet Jacobs trying to reach out to a certain group, certain audience to take pity on the slave woman. They have a purpose. These are strategies, rhetorical strategies that help them. Okay, we already did that. All right, so check this out. It's Mentor Sentence Day. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. President Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address. Now, we listened to that yesterday, so we know what the gist is. Some of us were already familiar with it. Copy this sentence down in your journals, and then I want you to take a few minutes and just write down a couple things you notice about it that strike you. Now, remember, we're thinking about things that persuade the audience, inform, motivate. What kind of rhetorical things might be happening? Go ahead, have a few moments to do that. I'm going to come around and see what you guys have going on. Good, a lot of nice stuff is happening. Sarah, I want you to share your first bullet point that you mentioned. Yes. So Sarah was talking about how she kept seeing the use of the word people, and maybe that was important for some reason. Yes, I believe it just might be. So this strategy, you've hit on a big one, is repetition. Using a word or a phrase over and over again, and specifically, you don't need to memorize this term here, but an epiphora is when it happens at the end of the phrase. So of the people, by the people, for the people, it's happening at the end of the phrase. This is repetition. And we know that, but what is it doing? Because that's what's more important. What is it doing for the sentence? Yes, it's making the word people clearer, and it's giving what to it? More emphasis. Yeah, it's definitely driving home something about people. Good, good. Okay, parallel structure. Somebody mentioned that. Go ahead, Tommy. Talk about that a little bit. Okay, so Lincoln's using of the, by the, for the people, and is anybody familiar with what grammatical structure that might be? Yeah, those are all prepositions. Yeah, that's right. Now, I don't want you to get confused because in writing we have talked about parallel structure to some degree, and I do always hone in on keeping it the same. So if you're ending in an ing, hiking, swimming, kayaking, you want to keep that flow. You don't want to add hiking, swimming, kayaked. You want to keep it all the same, and that's great for your resumes, great for when you're making lists. You want to keep everything the same when they start. It's the same here, but this is different because it actually has a purpose. It's not just because it's grammatically correct. It serves a purpose when you're trying to persuade. And what would that be? Don't look up here because I already pulled it up. Yes, it's more appealing to the ear for sure, and it's easier to grasp. So you hear it, and it has almost a rhyme, a rhythm to it. Of the people, for the people, by the people, whichever way they word. We'll get to that in a minute. But there's something that's memorable about that. Exactly. So this is another great strategy to use in your writing. So let's keep that one in mind. And then somebody said something about 3. Yes. Linda, go ahead, talk about that. Right. So there's 3 phrases, 3 little phrases. Again, we're on this of the people, by the people, for the people. What's so important about 3? We have that come up a lot, don't we? The number 3, we use it in writing a lot, but we see it everywhere. Yeah. Mythology, theology, 3 wise men, fairy tales, nursery rhymes. What are some that have 3 in them? Good. 3 blind mice. 3 little pigs. There's tons out there. So I did some research on this, and apparently the human brain can remember patterns. The smallest pattern is 3. So 3 is an important number. They've researched with the brain, but also it's just something we naturally find. So, is there a connection between why people have been writing with 3 in it for so long, and something that we remember, something that's more balanced maybe? The flow of it, like I was saying earlier, it's, so just think about that when you're writing, because ultimately all of these strategies are doing similar things. They're emphasizing, they're keeping things moving, they're allowing it to be a more pleasant experience for the audience's ear. And then with the repetition, especially, it's actually punching out something very specific. And we know that this end of the Gettysburg Address is really to unify. It's drawing out the idea that we need to come together. This government needs to come together. This is a government of people. It's a government by people, but it's mostly that government for people. And that brings me to another point that we're going to just touch on here. We talked about these. But would there have been a difference if Lincoln would have swapped these around? If it would have been by the people, for the people, of the people? I'm not asking for an answer right now. But I just want you to think about that, because this plays into your writing as being important for you to understand, what was he trying to achieve? Did he achieve it? Was there a stronger choice? Or based on where he was going with this, that this was the strongest choice? So just keep all of that in mind. We're going to move on now to a little more syntax. Based on what you know about commas, because of me giving you some feedback on your papers, what's going on or not going on in this sentence with the whole comma rules that's conventional to English? Right! Where's the conjunction before that third phrase? And why is the conjunction at the beginning of the sentence? We're not allowed to do that. Well, in rhetorical writing, in rhetorical speech making, there are liberties that one can take. Again, if you add that and in, which I've done for you so beautifully right here, does it break up the flow? Does it have the same impact? Is it going to get the same message across? That's what makes good writing, is being able to know your audience. Read your stuff out loud, whether it's written, it's going to be just something people read, or you're saying it out loud. What packs the biggest punch? So there was obviously a choice here, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend being super creative with college essays, but when you're talking and you're trying to get your message across and you're thinking things through, really thinking about your writing, these are things you need to consider. So very formal writing at the college level, they're not going to want to see this unless you're doing something that is a rhetorical draft. If you're writing something and the purpose of it is to get something across to your purpose, and normally a lot of writing is, but you'll want to check with your professors and see if they're okay with some of this stuff. But President Lincoln did it, and it worked well for him. The speech has been remembered now, and it's probably one of the most quoted speeches in our country. Another example I have of the lack of the conjunction here: I came, I saw, I conquered. Not I came, I saw, and I conquered. I came, I saw, I conquered. Ba 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 ba. Clap it out. I came, I saw, I conquered. I came, I saw, I conquered. Not I came, I saw, and I conquered. No. So keep that in mind as we move on. And yes, that was Shakespeare for those of you who were thinking about it and couldn't quite place the quote. That was from Julius Caesar. All right, now it's your turn. You're going to imitate this sentence. Get your journals out. You can do it on a fresh page, or you can do it right after the draft. Write a sentence and try to get some of that stuff in. The rule of three, parallelism, repetition if you can. That's a little bit harder, but try and get that in. Go ahead, make up a sentence. It could be about anything. Share with your partner. Get some feedback. Good things are happening. Yes. All right. So it looks like you guys are understanding this, but that's just kind of a sentence out of nowhere. So that's not really going to give us enough. We gotta get deeper here. Before we do, though, because we're going to do some revisions with that fun little draft you did, I want to show you my revisions. I wrote a draft earlier this year that I'm considering submitting for a conference, and it's about Ben Franklin and paralleling his life to Rip Van Winkle, the character from Rip Van Winkle. Now, you guys are familiar with those two from some of our earlier studies with American literature, but you don't really need to know the content of my paper. Just check these out. Even today, a society that finds themselves driven by power, wealth, and self-interest over compassion and collective communal humanity will continue to find itself substituting leaders and governments without ever establishing lasting positive change. Ugh, that's a lot. This is my last sentence in the paper. Something just wasn't popping for me. So I decided to do some revisions according to what we were going to talk about, rhetorical strategies, and I wanted to get some in there. So this is my revision. Tell me what you think. Even today, a society that finds itself driven by power, wealth, and self-interest over empathy, charity, and selflessness will continue to find itself substituting leaders and governments without ever establishing lasting positive change. Thoughts? You think it flows better? Me too. What do you notice from what we were talking about earlier? Yes, I added an extra rule of three, so I have 3 and 3. What else? There's one more thing that I did. I'm hoping somebody recognizes. Yes, they're all nouns. Yes, very good. So I'm not using prepositions, but I'm driving home the point of keeping them all the same, so it's easier for my reader. It's more balanced, and hopefully that's packing more of a punch. Now I want you to take those beautiful drafts you started and go ahead and find a spot that you really want to hit home to whoever you're trying to get your way with, and get a sentence in there and try and use some of these devices. Go ahead. I'll be around. Things are looking really great out there, you guys. Now take your eyes up here for a second. When you're finished working on your sentence, I want you to reflect on it too. So write in the margin, wherever you made that revision, I want you to tell me why you chose to revise that sentence and what that revision is doing for your overall draft. Like how is this adding to the draft? How does the sentence function in the draft now? Go ahead and do that, and just so you know, I will be collecting the journals. I will be giving you points for your hard work on this. So go ahead. I'll give you a couple minutes, and you can also talk with your partner, share, get some ideas. All right, everything looks like you guys are really picking up on this. I do want a few of you to come up and share your sentence on the board. I'll take volunteers first, and then if nobody volunteers, I will call in a few of you to come up and just write your sentence on the board, and we'll talk about them for a little bit. We'll say that the students have done that, and now I'm going to move on to the last piece before we would transition into the next part of the lesson. And this is just going to transition for me from the grammar, mini grammar lesson into the rest of the lesson. Okay, class, so we are going to be listening to Frederick Douglass's speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." You're going to hear Danny Glover read it. You're going to be given some worksheets to do a close reading of it, to identify some rhetorical strategies. And before we do that, I just want to highlight one thing so you see where we're going. I'm not going to take time to read this right now, but I would in the classroom. Students, what do you see? What is happening? I already have your highlighted, so we already know that this is repetition, but I'm not concerned about the terminology. I'm concerned about what it's doing and if you recognize it and if you're getting that. What is it doing? Your celebration, your shouts of liberty, your sermons, your religious parade. What is Douglass doing? What do you think? Yes, go ahead. Right. He's separating himself. So you've got them and you've got me. You've got them and Douglass. You've got your things, my things. He is separating himself, and by saying that over and over again, what? His audience starts to feel that too. They start to feel that tension, and then they start to feel how all these things are a part of their world, not our world. And we've seen this in other narratives that we've looked at through the beginning of the course. Mary Rowlandson's captivity narrative. You know, at first, the natives were them or the others, and by the end of the story, she was referring to herself with them as us. So this is something else to look for, and why he's using it, to what degree it's working. So we're going to look at all that now, and excellent work so far today. Thank you.